and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast UFO. I am not your normal host, Martin Willis. Martin is unfortunately separated from the internet at the moment because he is moving to his fortress of solitude. So instead, this week, you are saddled with me, Michael Lauck. Some of the longer-term listeners might remember me. I used to do the news for the show before we came to Dark Matter Radio Network and had to leave because I wasn't able to commit to every Wednesday night. But I'm happy to be back today. I'm happy to be back with all these people, and I am glad to fill in for Martin. Today we will have John Ventre on. We will unfortunately not be able to connect with John Tobin. This was all just too last minute, so there won't be a news. But luckily, we do have an astronomy segment with Andy Fleming. So if that is ready to go, we will get that right up here first, listen to the astronomy segment, and be back with John Ventre and talk about the Malaysian Airlines flight that is currently missing. Was it abducted by UFOs?
And hi, Martin and listeners. Now, once people realise that you're an amateur astronomer, they normally have two questions for you. The first is, have you ever seen a UFO? And my answer, in the broadest sense of the acronym, is, well, yes, I have. And you can check out a full report of my sighting with artists' impressions and possible explanations at podcastufo.com/category/press-releases. The second question they ask is, what are black holes? And of course, it's a good question. Well, mainstream astrophysicists believe black holes usually result from the core collapse of giant stars. These stars are thousands of times the mass of our Sun, and they end their relatively brief lives as supernovae. Although scientists have never actually seen a black hole, indirect evidence very strongly suggests that they exist. After all, they are a prediction of Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity, which was published way back nearly 100 years ago in 1915. When a gargantuan star ends its life, the nuclear fusion reactions in its core come to an end, and the star detonates. The resulting explosion seeds the nearby universe with heavy elements that make rocks, planets, and people. The matter that's left is no longer held up by radiation pressure from fusion reactions and collapses to a point of infinite density and gravity, what astrophysicists call a singularity. Now, these are stellar mass black holes. They are so dense and their gravity is so strong that nothing can escape from them, not even light itself. Hence the object appears mainly black, and why it's called a black hole. Perversely, they're not completely black, however. They do emit Hawking radiation and energy from matter spinning and accreting around them at gargantuan velocities. The event horizon is simply the point at which an object's escape velocity from a black hole exceeds the speed of light. In other words, it's effectively lost to our visible universe. Now, in 1974, radio astronomers indirectly detected a massive object in the centre of our Milky Way galaxy, in the direction of the constellation of Sagittarius. By 1998, astronomers working at the 10-metre Keck telescope on Mauna Kea in Hawaii confirmed it as a supermassive black hole, 4 million times the mass of our Sun, inferred by the enormous velocities of its orbiting stars. Further observations led to the profound discovery that most, if not all, large galaxies, including our next-door neighbour M31, the Andromeda Galaxy, have supermassive black holes at their centres. How they formed in the early universe is still a complete mystery. There's no need to worry, though, about our black hole at the centre of the Milky Way. Our monster, otherwise known as Sagittarius A star, is a massive 26,000 light years away from our Earth, and at the moment, you'll be pleased to hear, it's not feeding on nearby stars.
Well, thank you, Andy, for that. And I don't know about you listeners, but I could listen to Andy Fleming talk about anything. I love that accent. Now, once again, I'd like to apologize. We don't have news this week, but we do have a very interesting guest, and we'll be talking about a subject in the news, and that is the Malaysian flight 370 that has been missing. You may have heard on the internet about someone who suggested that it was abducted by aliens. And that man is our guest today, John Ventre. He is the author of An Alternative History of Mankind. He also wrote 12/21/12, A Prophecy, UFOs over Pennsylvania, a few other books. He is on the MUFON board, and he is also, I believe, the state director for Pennsylvania. John, are you there with us?
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And did I get that correct? You are still a MUFON board member?
Yeah, board, and I actually have 6 states, but primarily Pennsylvania.
And we see you on television some as well, don't we?
Yeah, on Friday nights at 10 p.m., we have a new MUFON-based show called Hangar 1, the UFO Files. And what makes that show different is it's based on real cases. You know, a lot of times some of these other shows that are on, like take Unsealed, if you've watched that, they show this file cabinet and they pull a file out, you know, all animated. They don't really have a file cabinet with any files because it's a made-up show as far as that goes. You know, what they're getting is probably historical stuff off the internet. But with the MUFON show, Hangar 1, this is for real. This is real cases that we've worked. So this is probably the only real show, unless you had an actual witness, you know, in the television show.
That's great. Now I've watched several episodes. I do enjoy that show. Will you be on? Are you on every episode?
Yeah, and they made me wear the same red shirt in every episode. I'm getting emails on Facebook, messages saying, why are you wearing the same clothes? I think what it is they're able to, you know, I did like 16, 17 hours of filming for the 8 shows to get 5 minutes in each show. But I think if you dress the same way, they can take clips and put it in any of the 8. So it doesn't look like, you know, one week you're wearing a turtleneck, and then the next, you know, interview you're in a red shirt. So I think that's the only reason, because I brought 3 outfits to wear for the filming, and they said leave the red shirt on.
Well, as we all know from watching Star Trek, the red shirt is a bad sign.
Oh, that's right. Those were the ones who died, right? The guys or is that the security guys wore the red shirts?
Yes, that was the guys that didn't tend to make it to the opening credits.
That's right. Well, I spent my career in security, 35 years at UPS as their state security director. So it's all goes hand in hand.
Great. Now, you are not here tonight as a representative of MUFON, correct?
No, I'm doing this interview on my opinions, not MUFON or the Hangar 1 show. You know, I mean, it was nice to mention both of those as credentials, but I want to do this interview more on my book and just my opinion.
Sure, and we will do that. But first, I'd like to give you a chance as a MUFON board member. It seems to me that MUFON, over the last couple of years, has gotten a lot of bad press on particularly a lot of internet radio shows. So what I'd like to do is basically give you a minute or so to explain to all the listeners why it's to their advantage to join MUFON and what makes MUFON worthwhile, and then we'll leave MUFON behind after that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, when all that bad press started a couple of years ago, it was really, it was one really long-term disgruntled state director that got on a vendetta to get even with MUFON because she was removed as the state director for her state. And, she was a social organizer in her early days, so she knew how to turn the crowd against you, calling members in every state and turning them against the organization. So it didn't look like it was coming from her, but all these different people writing in and going to these groups. So, she knew what she was doing, and it was unfortunate. I think they could have worked out the differences where she was demoted and maybe not being demoted or taken second in charge in the state or something, but it didn't work that way. So it turned into this really a campaign against MUFON from a long-term MUFON member, and that was unfortunate. So that's what everybody has heard. But I've been with MUFON now 16 years. I've been a state director for about half that time. I've been on their board for 3 years, and I'm an interim board member. I'm waiting for a permanent opening because they only have 9 board members, and there's 3 of us that are like in training. But we go to all the meetings and the conference calls, and I've never seen the they say like, well, there's people on MUFON that are government, and I've never seen that. I don't see those type of connections and stuff. It's just an organization. And like I said, if anything, the board has 9 members, and I think 6 of them are 75 and older. So, that's a different mentality when you're dealing with people from that generation. So they're a little more cut and dry, World War II methods, my way or the highway. I don't want to say too many things that sound negative, but it's different than if you were dealing with a bunch of 30-year-olds from Google, let's say. So as far as MUFON goes, it is the only organization that's out there that's international. It's been around since 1969. It has survived through all the years. We had, like I said, we're an international organization, 3,000 members. We're set up to do the investigations, and even this TV show with all the files that we have 70,000 files in a warehouse, and the producers are going through the older files that aren't electronic. We've gone electronic the last 8 or 10 years. But this is the real only organization you can join other than a local group in your town, which you're really not going to get cases to investigate, maybe a couple a year. I get over 300 in Pennsylvania. I get almost 1 case a day. And I would say with the show airing now, the number of cases are going to go up. Matter of fact, I was telling my guys this week, I said, we got already in the first quarter of the year, we have 8 close encounters of the second kind and 9 close encounters of the third kind. I think we only had 3 or 4 all of last year. People are coming out of the woodwork now because they're comfortable. They see us on TV. They want to get their case in front of us. And some of them are historic. And some real good cases, are coming out right now. Now, the close encounter of the second kind, because I know you're going to ask me that, what does that mean? The second kind means you basically saw a UFO below cloud level. First kind would be kind of high-flying, fast-moving. You don't really know what it is. That's unidentified. Second kind is identified. It's below cloud level. Close encounter of the third kind is where you saw the entity. And like I said, we've got 17 good cases just in Pennsylvania in the first quarter.
Well, that is amazing. Now, do you think that's because of the show, or do you think we're kind of in the middle of a flap?
Well, I don't think it's a flap. I thought about that too with the show. So I went back and looked, and probably 10 of the 17 came in before the show aired. So the show is bringing out the historic cases. I'm getting cases now where the guy will say, in 1969 this happened, in 1966 this happened. So I don't know. It's kind of strange that all of a sudden this year, prior to the show, 10, 11 of those good cases came out, and we're still getting them. But we're going to get probably, I guarantee you, 400 cases this year, because once people feel comfortable, they come out and they tell you what happened.
Okay, now before we leave MUFON behind, why should I join? Let's say I'm busy, I'm interested in UFOs. I can't investigate. I can't put time into that. Is it still a worthwhile organization for me to join?
Yeah, I would tell you to join mainly to support the group, because the only funding MUFON has is by people subscribing to the magazine. You get a monthly journal. And, you know, the subscription, if you get an online subscription, it's less than $3 an issue. The printed mailed copy is like $4 an issue. But that's really their only income. And, you know, and I've said this to people, is that, you know, you look at SETI. SETI recently said they were bankrupt and they needed money, and they received over $100 million in donations, a lot from Hollywood and Hewlett-Packard and those techie companies in California. You know, what does MUFON get? $20,000, $30,000 a year in donations? I mean, we're the ones actually performing the investigations. We're a nonprofit, so it's tax deductible. So, you know, if anything, if you just want to read about it, then just join, subscribe, get the magazine. If you want to be an investigator, because we live for the good case. You know, we live for that case that comes in and says, like we got one today in Harrisburg, where the witness says he saw a UFO and it dropped something. So it's like something fell to the ground. Now it's trace evidence, and so now you got a good case. It's a CE2.
Okay, so there's our plug for MUFON. Now we're officially separating. You're no longer a representative of MUFON for the rest of the show. You are John Ventre, the author of An Alternative History of Mankind. Is the book out yet?
Yeah, actually, it just got delivered to my house yesterday. It had been on Kindle since, let's say, the weekend when the publisher put it out there. So I've got the copies that can be mailed. Milk always takes a little longer, but yes, it's out there and it's ready to be shipped.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, because I did come in last minute, I didn't get a chance to read the book, and I apologize for that. But I have seen some of the material on it. Basically, you're saying that there's a historical alien presence in Earth's history?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the beginning. I really do. And from all the research I've done, what I've done with this book is the first couple of chapters, I've gone back and I try to retell our history as though they have always been here and how they have interfered. And then after that, I put everything I know about UFOs into this book. I have one chapter called Do You Know, Should You Know, where I put everything in chronological order and bullet points. So if you knew nothing about UFOs and only read that one chapter that has, I think, 166 bullet points, and it's in date order, you would have a very good understanding of this field. Then there's quotes, there's photos. So this is, and I'll be honest with you, this is my fifth book, third in the last 2 years since I retired, and I don't plan on writing anymore.
So this is it. This is the ultimate
I'm planning
contribution.
I'm planning that to be my last book. I do, I write a monthly article for the MUFON Journal, but I do not plan on writing any more books after this. I'm done. I've put everything I know about the field into this book. I don't know that I'm going to learn a lot more, but I'm done now with writing books.
Now, you used the word interference. Is it fair to say that you do not look upon extraterrestrials as a benevolent force?
Well, I'm torn on that because the stuff I've read from the 1950s, the Captain Ruppelt and Major Kehoe, the guys that were involved in all of this, they say they're not a threat. As a matter of fact, one of the writers from the 50s said, it's not the UFOs that are the problem, it's the people. Our demanding, wanting to know the truth and our legal rights. And so it's really the UFOs aren't, at least back then, they didn't view them as being dangerous. That's why the Air Force said that they were no longer going to investigate UFOs because they're not a threat to national security. So they must know they're not armed, they're not here to take over. But the only big but that I have, and don't take that literally, is the abductions. And I don't know too many people that have been abducted or tell us their story, and it's a good story. It is a kidnapping, a rape. It is just, I tell people, go call your state police and report it if you think you've been abducted, because that's how serious it is. David Paulides just wrote a book on state parks and the number of people that disappear from state parks. It's incredible. Now, I'm sure there's homicidal maniacs out there hanging around state parks, but what if that's not the only answer? So, my gut tells me there's more than one species, and the species that's here now, that's been here the last 20 years, let's say, I think they're hostile. I really do. And I agree with Dr. David Jacobs. They're not here to help us. They're hostile. Maybe the ones that were here back in the 50s were here to observe. And I think through the years, that's mainly what they've been doing. But you can't ignore this abduction thing, and I see it as hostile.
Now, what fresh perspective do you bring to this topic? Because this is, frankly, not a new idea. So what makes John Ventre's book the one that our listeners should pick up and read?
Yeah, I've never, people will write something on one particular idea. I've never seen anyone take our history and start, and go through our entire history as to how they may have affected it, what their agenda is. They'll write a book on abductions and talk about a few people, but nobody has actually taken this and retold our whole history. And, I was watching, I think on History Channel, The Story of Us or The Story of Mankind, whatever they called it, a couple of years ago. And that's really where I got the idea. They went through and retold American history, let's say. And I said, you know what? I'm going to retell our history as though they have always been here. They interfered. And I give a number of examples along the way and possible things. There are things I don't know, obviously, but, you look at Egypt, were those the gods that they brought out, Anubis, et cetera, the 8-foot tall humans with animal and bird heads, that's genetic engineering is what that is. Can I prove that? No, I can't. But you know what? If you're in a primitive society and you bring 4 8-foot tall men with animal bird heads, I'd call that crowd control. And that's probably what they were meant to do when you see that type of creature come walking out. So, I obviously there's things that I just give my opinion, but then there's other things. Like I think that they're here and they observe our governments, our different forms of government, the conflicts between races. I've never bought the evolution theory. I don't believe that. There is evolution to a point, but I don't think we got here from evolution, not humans, Homo sapiens. But I definitely think that the different forms of government, the racial groups. I was talking to Richard Dolan. He goes, well, climate and stuff. You'll get that change in the pigment and stuff. I said, yeah, but I take a globe and I put my finger on one latitude and I spin it, and it goes through South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Why are there 3 different racial groups if they're in the same temperature zone? It doesn't make sense to me. So I think they've been here and they've interfered in a lot of ways. I think they've helped in some ways, to help the United States. I think they helped Washington. His diary talks about green-skinned aliens, green-skinned Indians that gave him the British coordinates. It's in his journal because he wasn't that good a general, and they helped him. And I think they were helping America and just to see how people act when they're free. And it kind of worries me now that China is rising, and it seems like they're getting a lot of help. And I hope they haven't shifted, to see how communism and totalitarianism works, because you can make a lot quicker decisions than you can with our form of government. But you depend on their leader being benevolent, and that doesn't always happen.
So really, this is much more of a socio-political book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The first couple of chapters, then I give you everything I know about the topic, about the facts, about the case for UFOs. All my books are political. They really are. Even the science fiction ones, I wrote the Apophis 2029, which is about the asteroid that may hit us in 2029. But I set the world in the year 2029, and I put a lot of politics into it as to, where we'll be, what the planet will be like, et cetera. So, I'm opinionated, and I do put politics in.
Okay, now before we go on, I'm going to give you a chance to sell the book here. You mentioned it was on Kindle, so obviously that's Amazon.com. Where for our people out there who like to hold paper, where can they get a physical copy of the book?
Yeah, well, if you want the autographed copy, you can only get that from me, and it's at my website, which is johnventre.com, and that's V like in Victor, ENTRE, johnventre.com, and I autograph it and I'll ship it to you. It's on my website. You just purchase it there.
And I hate to be crass, but how much is that?
It's $21, which includes shipping. So I think that's a pretty good price for the autographed copy.
It might be worth it just to read about Washington and the aliens alone. That's a new one to me.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of I have a lot of knowledge in this field, and I decided to put it all in chronological order. And like I said, even if you skip the first half of the book and just go to the chapter with the bullet points, if you knew nothing about this field, matter of fact, I've used that chapter as I was writing it this past year. I did two or three conferences where I didn't put up a PowerPoint. I took that chapter and I just started reading each bullet point. I had never had so many people come up to me wanting to buy my book saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And I said, well, this is in my next book, which isn't written yet, but I do have some other good ones.
Okay. Now, I think most of our listeners, if they haven't seen you on Hangar One, are going to know you recently because, unfortunately, Malaysian Flight 370 disappeared on March 8th, as everyone knows. And you have become the poster boy, as it were, for the alien abduction hypothesis. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. And but the point that kind of got missed in this was what I was trying to do was throw out another alternative. What really ticked me off and why I wrote my little article that kind of went viral, and I wasn't meant to. I sent it to my local contacts here around Pittsburgh, and it ended up all over the place. It ended up on CNN. But what happened was I read this article, and I think it was online on Bing or MSN, and the guy was talking about there are only 5 possibilities, and he listed all 5. And I said, you know what? In reading what happened, when you tell me a plane vanished, that's the language that was used. Transponders stopped, no distress calls, no cell phone, no signature of an explosion, no debris. Well, then let me tell you, there's a 6th possibility, and that's that it was abducted, because there is a history to this. And my other point that I wanted to get out there was that I think they're still alive. I don't think these people are dead. And some of the people that came back at me, I said, well, why is it okay to say it blew up and everybody's dead? Why is it okay to say it's at the bottom of the ocean and everybody's dead? And why is it not okay to say it was abducted and they're still alive? And that's my feeling on this. And I can give you more facts on it if you want to, keep discussing it.
Well, yeah, honestly, I think a lot of our listeners, frankly, kind of came across that and were like, whoa, I'm going to use a bad word here, was kind of a crackpot thing to say. So defend yourself.
Yeah. Well, I did go out on the limb by saying it so early because it was based on that guy, the one writer saying there was only 5 possibilities, and it was based on the language describing it as vanished. and the questions that were coming up. So I wouldn't say it was crackpot, because I went out on a limb, definitely. I mean, it's a lot safer now, 3 weeks later, to come out and say, was it taken by, was it abducted? Because at the time, there was still a very good chance that they would find debris, and I was going to look stupid. But I said, you know what, based on what the way it was described, and I think that morning I wrote it, I was watching the news, and they were talking. I saw one article about how the radar had been changed, manipulated, and falsified. And I saw another article on the news on saying now it turned west and then it went south. I said, these people don't know anything. They don't know anything. And the other point that I kind of concluded my opinion piece, and it was my opinion piece, was that, let me get this right. I was on the Anderson Cooper show 2 years ago, and I told Anderson Cooper that every cell phone call, every text, every email is monitored in this country by the NSA. And he laughed at me. He didn't believe it. You can go back. I got the DVD. I got it on my website, right side of my website, Anderson Cooper. Watch it. I told him that. He laughed. And then it came out, yeah, that is being done by the NSA. So now, with that in my mind, I said, well, let's see, this plane's going into Chinese airspace. Are you telling me our military doesn't have a satellite looking at Chinese airspace, and the Chinese don't have satellites looking to see what's incoming? So you're telling me China and the United States don't know what happened to this plane? That is an absolute impossibility. They have to know. The military has to know what happened to this plane. If they know I'm on this show with you right now, they know what happened to this plane. And that was really my concluding point, was that they know. To think in a world where they got a satellite that can look down right now through my skylight and see my notes in front of me on this Malaysian flight, they can see that from a satellite right now. And you tell me you don't know where the plane is. But what I did too, just to, I didn't just throw it out of there, and just pull this out of the air, was I know our history. And what I did was I gave some examples. If you want to talk about aircraft that disappeared, we have the Flight 19 out of Fort Lauderdale, December of 1945. We had 5 bombers that took off. They disappeared. So we sent up a large Martin Mariner, which was like a recovery plane, which was huge. It disappeared. So 6 planes, 27 crew members totally vanished. And that's the same wording they used on television. This plane vanished. A couple of years later, 8 years later, General Chidlow in 1953, and this is in my book. This stuff I got out of my book, Alternative History. He said, we have stacks of flying saucer reports. We take them very seriously when you consider how many men and planes we have lost trying to intercept them. So those planes were probably shot down, maybe not, or disappeared. But then in 1953, after he says that, November 23rd, we have what came to be known as the Kinross incident. We send a Scorpion jet up from Kinross Air Force Base to intercept a UFO. I got it on radar. They're heading right at each other, head-on collision. Well, the UFO keeps going. Our jet disappears, and so does the 4 crew members. They have that on radar. No debris, no recovery. We never find the crew members. And probably the more recent best case was the Fred Valentich case in 1978 in Australia. They got him on radio calling in. He sees a large, like shiny cigar-shaped object with 4 lights on it. He says it's not an airplane, an aircraft. It's coming closer to him. You hear this metal. You can hear it. On the radio transcripts are still out there. You can find it. You hear this banging and this metal, and he's gone. No debris. They knew exactly where he was. It wasn't like he was down by Antarctica. He was right off of the coast of Australia. They know exactly where they lost him. No debris, no recovery. Plane's totally gone. And then I said to some people recently, I said, let's say a Carnival cruise ship off of Miami, they find it totally abandoned. What is the media going to say? Are they going to say, well, it was engine fumes and everybody had to get off the boat? Are they going to say it was pirates that abducted the 4,000 passengers? there's no media outlet that's going to say that the people were abducted by UFOs. And that's one of the problems with our media, and why the MUFON Symposium this year, which I'm running in Philadelphia, July 18, 19, 20, the topic is UFOs in the media. So it was kind of perfect that we're going to talk about why the media, other than these internet radio shows and your local small newspaper will write these things, you will not get network news or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal talking about this. So and then the reason I say that about the Carnival cruise ship is that actually happened in 1872. The Marie Celeste merchant ship was found in the ocean, dinner on the table, nobody on board, absolutely nobody on board. And it's happened, my book is full of instances of military troops disappearing. You have the Roanoke, North Carolina colony disappeared. Even the Indians said they didn't know where they went. There's a Eskimo village in 1930, same thing. Sled dogs there, food on the table, not one human being left in the village. You got the British troops in Gallipoli, Turkey, 1917. The troop, they saw them walk into a cloud, march into a cloud. The cloud passes, there's no more troops. 800 of them gone. 6,000-man Roman 9th Legion near Rendlesham Forest, of all places, where we've had 2 UFO cases, the big Rendlesham case in 1980 and an earlier one, I think that was in 59 or 57. That legion just totally disappeared. Nobody knows where that entire legion went. And there's even more cases than that. So I didn't just pull it out of my hat. I do know what has happened in this field, and that's why I wrote it. Now, I was nervous about putting it out there because I knew it was early in the process. I was going out on a limb, but I said, you know what, based on the way they described it, and I got a little mad, the fact that they would never acknowledge this. I said, you know what, I'm going to put it out there and see what happens. And, I don't want to say luckily 3 weeks later they haven't found it, because I wish they would. But, there's still hope. And I do believe these people are alive. I really don't think that they're dead. I don't think they're in the bottom of the ocean like everybody seems to want to find out that that's what happened.
Well, I will give you that it is incredibly odd, given the proximity of China and the number of Chinese aboard that plane, that they don't have more information on it. You'd think they would have satellites. I mean, they're bristling against Japan right now. They're having issues with India right now. They have to keep an eye on North Korea, just like everyone else. You'd think they'd have plenty of eyes in the sky. So that does make this all very strange. I think a lot of people are still going to say that an alien abduction is a little bit out there. I'm going to run with that for a second, though. I'm going to grant you that. And I'm going to ask you this. If the aliens, who haven't necessarily gone to great lengths to hide themselves, but haven't exactly, landed in Times Square either, are to the point where in this day and age, where they knew it would be missed, are willing to grab an entire airliner, is that something we should be concerned about? I mean, does that denote some new policy? Should we be scared about what comes in the next year?
Well, that's why I say that. You can't ignore these abductions. And David Paulides' book he researched state parks, and the number of people that disappear are astronomical, and they don't find them. And what's funny is that my son, a couple of years ago, when he graduated college, I was over his house and just talking to him and his roommate there, a couple of roommates. And I said, people get abducted. And they said to me, well, how many? I said, well, I don't know. So let's go online. So we Googled it, and there's 250,000 people a year in the United States that are missing persons reports. And it turns out that almost 90% of them come home or found, et cetera. But there was somewhere around 30,000 people a year in the United States that totally disappear. Now, some are homicides, some are runaways that never do return, but 30,000 people a year just in this country, And then I started thinking about, the milk cartons that you see with the kids that are missing, and then all the people who claim that they've been abducted. And you listen to David Jacobs and stuff, and it doesn't seem to me that whatever species is here right now, I don't think they're friendly. I think they're hostile. So would they just grab an airliner with 239 people? Yeah, they would, because what are you going to do about it? If they're watching us and listening to our news, they know the news is never going to report it as being a alien abduction. So what do they got to lose? Nobody is going to believe it. They've already called the bluff before they did it, because nobody's going to believe it. We've set it up in this country that you can never, ever talk about the extraterrestrial problem, because nobody's going to believe it. They'll think you're crazy. And you can thank the CIA for that, because that was their modus operandi back in 1953 with the Robertson panel. They even said they were going to come out and make fun of people who report UFOs. They were going to debunk it. They were going to give any answer possible. There's a 1958 memo from the CIA where they said that's what they did in 1953. And they even sponsored Walter Cronkite, the most believable news person in America. They sponsored his CBS special with the agenda to debunk UFOs, and he went along with it. So we kind of like painted ourselves in a little trick box here that, if anything they do, if HIV came from them, if, maybe that's a way of getting rid of the human race. How can you ever come out and say that? Nobody's ever going to believe it. So we have a problem with truth right now, and that shouldn't be, not in this country.
Now, do you think that is human hubris, or do you think that perhaps there's some stronger alien presence than we realize, to take it to a movie, They Live, where they are actually influencing some of that?
That's the stuff that's hard to figure out. The things I do know are real are the documents out there, and I put about 20 of them in my book, where, you have generals talking about UFOs, you have the CIA, and there's like 4 memos of them talking back and forth regarding UFOs, statements that have been made. The Kennedy memo, 10 days before his death, he put out 2 memos regarding UFOs. Those things I know are real. So that proves to me UFOs are real. I don't know about, the hybridization, are there people walking among us that's part alien? I don't know if Eisenhower actually met, with extraterrestrials. I don't know if they're the real problem, and it's not the Bilderbergers and the Rothschilds. It's them, the reptilians, as I can't think of a British guy that talks about that, but he's convinced that there's a reptilian species here that's running everything. You can get into any avenue you want with this and convince yourself that that's what's really going on. I don't know if that stuff's real. I do know UFOs are real, and there's documentation to that point that they are real.
Okay, they're real. Have you seen one?
No, and that's the weird thing, is I never have. And let me tell you a little bit how I got into this. And this is interesting, because nearly everyone I know got into UFOs because they loved it as a kid. Stan Gordon lives 3 miles from me. He got into it with Kecksburg. I think he was 9 years old. And just about everybody in MUFON said, oh, yeah, as a kid, I was into this. I read every UFO book. And then they asked me, and I said, I never read a UFO book. I had no interest in UFOs. What I did do, I was a Comic-Con guy. I went to horror, conventions and Comic-Cons and collected famous monsters of filmland and built models of, Frankenstein and the Mummy and stuff like that. But what happened was I wanted to write a science fiction book. So in 96, I said, I was going to write it on the year 2000. And I said, well, I don't have enough time to really do this. I've never written before. I said, let me pick the Mayan calendar. So that gave me plenty of time. I had 16 years to get it done. And so the more I started researching this end time prophecies and all these different cultures, the one thing I kept coming across is they're talking about people from the stars, people on flying shields, star people, in a number of different cultures. And I said, you know what? As soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to look into this UFO field. And that's how I got involved. Really, in 98, I joined MUFON. And at that time, I knew nothing about UFOs other than, the thing from outer space that crashed with James Arness in the Antarctic. That's about all I knew, So that's how I got involved. But I've never seen a UFO. I thought I did in 2008. We were having a UFO wave across Pennsylvania. Our number of sightings tripled. And I had a pair of Dobermans at the time, and I let them out. They were well behaved. I let them out my front door, and they would never run away. And all of a sudden, I saw this thing in the sky, really bright, moving really fast. And I said, I just saw my first UFO. But I did what we train our investigators to do. I went back in the house, brought the dogs in with me, and I got on the websites. And there are different websites that you can look up the space station, meteors, satellites, etc. And there it is. I put Greensburg, Pennsylvania, my zip code, and the date. And exactly at the time I saw it at 10:22 p.m., there was a small asteroid that went across the sky, and it reflected the moonlight. So that was the bright light I saw as it was going across the sky. So, I thought I saw a UFO, but I didn't. But I applied what we train our people to do to try to scientifically investigate it. But I've never seen one. I'm not sure I want to. All along, I said, if I saw one, I'm going to wave them down, make contact, because they're going to tell me the truth and everything about civilization and the universe. But I don't think that's what they would do. I don't think they regard me any more than I regard the stink bugs that it seem to be in my house right now and hatching. And what's crazy is if you look at two documents in particular, they tell you to stay away from UFOs. Do not get under them. Don't, hide, run. Don't get caught. And those two documents are the Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control. It's a FEMA-approved hazmat book that's in every fire department in the United States. Chapter 13 is on UFOs and the threat. And I would tell people to read that, because it'll tell you about radiation, psychological effects of abduction. This is in a fire department book. Show me the chapter on the Bigfoot attack. Show me the chapter on poltergeist attack and what to do. It's not there. But there is a chapter in every fire department on UFOs. And the same thing with the Air Force. From 1968 to 70, they taught a course at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. It was called, it was a Physics 370 class. Chapter 33 was on UFOs. And again, it gives all these examples, and it talks about the threat from UFOs. So, I would cite both of those as examples of don't get caught. Don't get captured. It's like playing paintball. Don't get hit. Run.
Is that fire manual still current?
Yeah. They just put out. I went on Amazon and I ordered a copy for myself. I got the 1978 edition. I bought that maybe 10 years ago. They came out with a new one in maybe 98, something like that, or maybe it was 2008. And yes, it's in there, chapter 33. It's called UFOs and the Threat. And here's the crazy thing. And nobody's put this connection together, but it's in the book because people haven't done their research. Matter of fact, Fact or Faked on the Sci-Fi Channel did an episode on the Battle of L.A. And they were able to find all of these witnesses and go through it and prove that there was something in the sky there and it wasn't a balloon. And it was most likely a UFO. The thing they missed was the co-author of this FEMA-approved book, The Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control. He says right in the book, I was a witness to the Battle of L.A. That's why I included this chapter. The guy went on to be an attorney. He was a reserve officer in, I don't remember if it was the Navy, and he became the deputy fire chief of Los Angeles. The reason he put that chapter in is he saw the Battle of L.A. Now, what better witness can you have than him, who now puts it in the FEMA-approved book that's in every fire department, and it's out there. You can buy it. I'd recommend it.
And do you know the exact title of that again?
Yeah, The Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control. And the author is William Brahme, Brahme, Brahme.
I'm surprised that there's not a more recent edition than 98. Given
Maybe it could have been 2004, 2008. It was within the last 10 years. I kind of think every 20 years or so he updates it and puts it out. I have the 78 edition, and I'm telling you, within the last 10 years he put it out again. Whether it was 04, 08, 06, I'm not sure, but he did update it, and it's in there. Because the reason I know it's in there, it was on the news. There was a news segment out there talking about this fire officer's guide and the chapter on UFOs, and I saw it. It was maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago. And Jose Escamilla, he makes documentaries. He also had it in his, but he had the earlier edition. That interview was maybe 10, 12 years ago.
Let's get back to your book for a second instead of selling this fire guide. What's one of the? Let's pick. We only have about 5 or so minutes left. Pick out one other just amazing thing that you can back up from your book that listeners aren't going to be aware of.
Oh boy, there's so much in there. There's a lot in there with battles, like during. Oh, here's one during Vietnam. There were a couple of things in Vietnam. One was that the generals, we would say that we would call UFOs during Vietnam as helicopters. The only problem, and this general says it, is that the North Vietnamese didn't have helicopters until the end of the war. But we would always call them helicopters because there was no other way to code them and describe them. And there was William Cooper talks about when he served in Vietnam and now whole villages of people disappeared. So that goes along with your Flight 370. And there was one incident in particular where we send up 2 jets after a UFO. It's chasing it, goes out over the ocean. We fire on it. As soon as we fire, the UFO takes a 90-degree turn. We miss it. Our missiles hit an Australian destroyer called the HMS Hobart. Absolutely, we hit the Australian destroyer because the UFO led us right towards it, and as soon as we fired, it took off and we hit the ship. And that's that general who talks about the UFOs during Vietnam. We used to call them helicopters. And he ended up getting promoted really high, I think, into the Joint Chiefs of Staff, et cetera. But, there's an example that's documented and it's real.
From your book, is there a lot more UFO activity in this area of the South China Sea, or basically where the Malaysian flight disappeared than people in America would realize?
I would doubt it, because if you look at who has UFO reporting centers, and this has always, like, some people will come out and say, well, this is an American phenomenon. Because if you look at the number of cases reported every year, it's 80% reported in the United States. Well, that's only because you have the MUFON. You have a group that you can report it to. MUFON's international, but 90% of the members are in the United States. Canada, the UK, we're getting bigger there. But when you go out to India, China, there's a third of the world's population is right in that area there, and there aren't UFO reporting centers. So that's part of the problem. I did get information from an Egyptian doctor who said that there were UFO sightings in the area of Malaysia, and I got his name, and I have it in a little write-up that I made, that he claims there were UFO sightings with this jet. But I think part of the problem is you don't have UFO reporting centers around the world. But let me give you one more fact on UFO reporting centers. Now, Japan and China do have UFO reporting centers, government-sponsored buildings that you could go in and report it. South America, they handle the UFO cases through their FAA like it's an air safety issue. The United States and the UK handle it through their Defense Department. Now think about that. We're the only 2 countries really that go after them with our jet fighters to shoot them down because we want the technology. South America handles it as an air safety issue through the FAA. And other countries just have UFO reporting centers, as a government facility that you can report it to, like the IRS. So, that tells you something. We're after the technology, and we must not think that they're hostile because we shoot at them.
Well, I hate to say it, but we are coming to the close of the show already, John. So this is probably a great time to take another minute and throw out your digital vital statistics there, how people can get a hold of you, how people can get a hold of this book and your other books.
Yeah, well, the simplest thing would be, as far as my books go, which I got 3 out there right now that I think are as good as any out there. It's at johnventre.com. And anybody interested in our conferences, that's at MUFONPA.com. We do a Philly, Pittsburgh, and an Erie conference. But for my books, it's johnventre.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on today. Really enjoyed the talk with you, and I'm sorry that Martin couldn't be here with you. And good luck with the new book, An Alternative History of Mankind. One other quick question. You said you could get it on Kindle. Is that available as an iBook as well?
I don't know. What do you mean by an iBook? I know you can get on the Kindle to read it.
iBook would be the iPad version of Kindle stuff.
Oh, yeah. If you can order it through Kindle through your iPad, you would get it there also.
Okay, great. Well, thanks once again. And now I'd like to take a second to thank Martin for having me back today and apologize to all of the listeners out there that I am not Martin. It was good to be back on the show. Hopefully this proves to some of you that I did not run because I was a CIA disinformation specialist, which I know I was accused of being. In all seriousness, though, I would like to thank Keith and Dark Matter Radio for making this a much easier experience than I thought it was going to be. Thanks to Andy Fleming for the astronomy report. Apologies to John Tobin for not being able to get with him for the news. Thanks to Peggy, who is on our Facebook page. And I would like to remind everybody that you can connect with Podcast UFO all the time at podcastufo.com. There is a live chat running when we do the live shows. There's also a great forum that is, frankly, a bit underutilized. But we are on there talking about this show, past shows, future shows, other topics. So get on there. And if you're on Facebook, you can find us at Facebook. Now, we have a very active Facebook community. I think something like 8,000 likes on Facebook, maybe more now. I'm not sure. And that is run by Peggy Shunning. She kind of oversees that. And I'd like to thank her for all the work she does there. And that's it. Thanks once again for listening to Podcast UFO. I'm Michael Lauck.